Welcome back to another episode of the Media Pass. I'm your host, Alex, with my other host, Matt. Matt, how you doing?
Hey, what's up, Alex? Pretty good, man. Pretty good. I just noticed I'm really happy with where my beard length is right now. As a guy whose like facial hair grows pretty quickly, it's really like a very tight window of like happiness with the length, where it's like a day after you. No, it's like 2 days after you trimmed it. Between 2 days and 4 days after you trimmed it. That's like the ideal enjoyment of it. But I'm feeling pretty good. I'm actually going to watch some live basketball today. I'm going to the Pistons game tonight. Pistons Cavs.
Oh, wow.
Not covering it. Just there to be there. But yeah, feeling good, feeling great, man. It's March. March is reading about rookies month. Be talking a lot about rookies at some point. Not today, but
Matt specifically asked if we could do do 2 rookie pods this month. So kind of spoilers, I guess. We're going to be doing 2 rookie pods this month, which I'm excited about because I watch rookies, but like I don't watch like if I'm watching a Warriors game, I'm not specifically watching Brandon Pajemski. I'm just kind of paying attention to the Warriors as a whole. So like I'll see them do good things, but I'm not necessarily like I'll watch a Heat game. Not necessarily watching Jaime Jaquez, but like I'll notice him. So, Matt, you did fantastic work last year with rookies, and I'm excited for it this year. And we'll have some stuff on the podcast for you. But today's episode is all about underrated players, because there's nothing more fun than talking about players who play like 15 minutes a game, which is one of the guys that I'm going to be talking. I actually didn't realize how few minutes one of my players was playing, and I looked at it today and I was like, I'm really going to be talking at length about this guy for an extended amount of time, and he's only playing 15 minutes a game. And I'm sure that's probably the case for at least one of your guys as well. So very, very excited about today's episode. I know Matt and I both put a pretty solid amount of prep work into this. So yeah, I mean, you want to lay out the table and explain why this matters?
yeah. So first thing, like obviously, it does draw the eye. You know, underrated players. It's something you'd click on YouTube. I would do it, right? If I was perusing through YouTube before I went to bed. That's usually when I like to do my YouTubing. But it's also important. I think this show is meant to be instructive, first and foremost. Like we're trying to, like we say, get into the weeds, give you the media pass, right? Help you see the game the way media members do. Media members who are honest and, respect the profession, right?
Yeah. I think you just explained the name of the podcast I don't think we've ever explained that before.
I think the first episode you probably did. You probably did in the first episode.
Okay.
In the weeds, you definitely used that term. That's where I got it, is from you. Maybe it was just internal conversations, but anyways. We let it all out.
Sorry.
It's okay. Train of thought. It's coming back to me. But and so I think fans are getting smarter. I think fans are generally getting smarter, but there is still a bias towards traditional counting stats. How do I know that? Because I mean, this is the last time on this podcast I'll throw shade at players that are better at basketball than me, but like there's no reason really Julius Randle should be on an all-star team. He's not one of the top 25 players on the planet. He's a very good basketball player, and he fills a very specific need on a specific type of team, but he is not one of the top 25 basketball players on the planet. And so that tells us that there's still something missing in the analysis. And so these players, there's a lot of, we're not ranking them. We're not saying these are the 6 most underrated players. These are just 6 underrated players. In the end of the podcast, we're actually just going to riff like random dudes that are just underrated. We're not putting any numbers on this. We're trying to kind of give you guys a sense of how to identify when somebody's being undervalued by the general consensus. And why does that matter? Well, some of you want to work in media, right? A great way to, kind of catapult your media career, or if you want to work on the team side, is to be able to be ahead of the curve, evaluating certain players, right? And kind of being able to identify them before the rest of the pack, having a market advantage. And then the other thing is, even though me and Alex I know Alex does a little bit more than me. We don't do too much sports betting, and we definitely don't do like we don't give betting advice, but like if you
You
know
don't want
like
betting
certain
advice
players,
from me.
yeah, no. If you know certain players are being undervalued by the general consensus, that means the sports books are probably maybe a little bit behind on them too. So you could, who knows, cash in on some prop bets. Maybe not with just these specific players, but again, just using like kind of the method me and Alex are using for identifying these guys.
Yeah, and like there's different levels to underrated, because I mean you can be like an 18, 19, 20 point per game scorer and be underrated, or you can be like, like I mentioned earlier, you can be a 15 minute per game type of player and still be underrated. Like it's not all of these players that we're going to talk about are on the same caliber. They're all, in different phases of their careers and fill different roles and are different archetypes for sure. So with all that being said, do you want to kick it off or do you want me to?
Who usually does the kicking off? I feel like, do I usually kick off things?
I honestly don't know. I think you probably kick stuff off more than I do.
So why don't you kick it, man?
It doesn't matter to me. I'll go ahead and take lead on
I'm a
this.
selfless co-host, man.
I know. I'm trying to think of who I should start with, because like audience retention is somewhat important. So I probably shouldn't lead with one of my guys. We'll start off with the guy who probably has the worst timing to be talking about right now. Dante DiVincenzo. He shot horrible last night. Was absolutely not good offensively. I thought he played pretty good defense, all things considered, especially he had to guard Steph Curry for a long portion of the night. And that's no easy task. So let's kind of take a look at what he's been doing. Last 15 games, 21.8 points per game. In that span, 39.4% from three, 12 attempts a night. That's pretty ridiculous. The points per game is whatever. His overall shooting from the field is a little shakier. At the rim, meh. And then in the mid-range, I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I think when you're talking about Dante DiVincenzo, over the last 20 games or so, you're kind of looking at him as the step-up guy playing as this second option because he has to, because Julius Randle's out. He's had to brunt a significantly larger portion of the offensive load than he was prior to Julius Randle going out. And I think Dante DiVincenzo is very underrated, not because I think he's like secretly some spectacular second option. I think he's been fine and been serviceable to keep the Knicks competitive while Julius Randle's been out, while Hartenstein has been kind of struggling with some injury stuff. OG has occasionally been in and out of the lineup with injuries, and obviously Randle's out. I think Dante DiVincenzo is a fantastic third option, and you're going to have a really hard time finding a better third option, specifically next to Brunson and Randle, than Dante DiVincenzo. When he's sharing the floor with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle this season, he scores 21 points per 75 possessions, 47.7% from three on 10.7 attempts per 75, and he has a 70.7% true shooting percentage when sharing the floor with those guys. He is hilariously efficient on meaningful volume. He's a floor spacer. He gives those guys who need spacing exactly that, and he does it at a ridiculous level, like 47.7% from three on 10.7 attempts per 75 possessions when he's on the floor with them. Since the OG trade, he's been even better. When he's on the floor with Brunson and OG, so even taking out the possessions where in games where Julius Randle hasn't been on the floor, when he's on the floor with Brunson and OG, the Knicks have a 129.2 offensive rating, 114 half-court offensive rating, which is 100th percentile. They have a 108.3 defensive rating, 90.8 in the half court, which is 95th percentile. So let's talk about his defense a little bit, since I mentioned their defensive rating since the OG trade. He kind of acts as like the off-ball chaser. If you watch any OKC game, he kind of scratches the same itch that Lou Dort scratches, as far as like, anytime, they're running flare screens to try and get shooters open, Dort's going to be the one chasing. That's what Dante DiVincenzo does. He does a lot of that stuff. I'm not saying he does it at the level that a guy like Lou Dort does it, but that's kind of the role that he's playing. And I think he does it pretty well, considering how difficult of a job that is to have on a nightly basis. I mean, you're running constantly for a full 48 minutes, not 48 minutes, for a full, 30, however many minutes you're playing.
It's damn near 48 with Tom Thibodeau.
Yeah, exactly. Josh Hart played 47 minutes and 10 seconds last night, something like that. It was insane. So Dante DiVincenzo defensively has probably one of the hardest jobs out of any player on the Knicks. And as you can see in those stats that I just mentioned, he's doing a good job. And I think that definitely passes the eye test as well. He's very active in passing lanes. I think just defensively as a whole, he's very engaged. I don't ever get the vibe that he's like taking a possession off or that he's being lazy. Even if he is not a flawless defender, I generally feel like he is engaged and active in communicating and giving effort. Does that mean he doesn't make mistakes? No, absolutely. He still makes mistakes. I think he ends up the Knicks, whenever they end up in rotation, he's usually one of the guys having to rotate. And so it can sometimes make him look, I think, a little bit worse than he actually is, having to close out on shooters whenever the Knicks are put in rotation. And then sometimes he'll end up as like the low man, and he has to try and like play cleanup and contest like attacks at the rim. And he's a 6'4" guard. He's not super big. I think he plays a little bit bigger than he is, but he's still only 6'4". And he can occasionally overhelp. But overall, I think just from a value perspective and what he provides for the Knicks, specifically on offense, obviously, I think defensively he's probably fine to slightly above average, but I'm not going to like write a dissertation about Dante DiVincenzo's defense. That was a lot of alliteration right there. Dissertation about Dante DiVincenzo's defense. But yeah, I've been very impressed with him, and I think we kind of saw the wall of what you can get away with Dante DiVincenzo as your second option, where it's kind of like, okay, we know what he's capable of, probably being a little bit overextended right now. But when Julius Randle comes back, I think overall Dante DiVincenzo is going to be better off from this stretch where he's had to play that overextended role a little bit. And I mean, it's not to say he hasn't put up numbers. He had that one stretch where he was averaging it was like a 5-game span. He was averaging like 30 points per game. It was ridiculous. So, shout out Dante.
The irony that somebody playing for the New York Knicks could be underrated, but you're right. And I think a thing that really isn't talked enough with the OG Anunoby, Emmanuel Quickley trade is that having DiVincenzo basically allowed the Knicks to acquire OG Anunoby without paying any on the court tax. What do I mean? Like, we talk a lot about trade-offs, right? You make certain decisions. You're like, okay, I'm going to add more defense, but I understand I'm going to lose some offense. So when they lost Quickley, they didn't really affect the Knicks, even though Quickley has a higher ceiling than DiVincenzo. He probably is a better player right now at this moment. The thing is, when you have a Jalen Brunson, the guy you want next to him, and then also when you have an OG Anunoby at the 3, the guy you want in between them, I should say, right? In the middle of the Klondike bar sandwich. That sounds really weird now that I say it, but is a guy who can space the floor like DiVincenzo has this year. He's a plus 40% 3-point shooter. Cut for offensive rebounds. Play physical. make connective tissue passes, attack closeouts, play that chaser role. I say chaser role because OG Anunoby is a great man defender, but he's not that great at going through off-ball screens. So having DiVincenzo to handle those while Anunoby handles, the more difficult isolation or pick and roll specialists, that works perfectly. So basically, everything Quickly was doing for this Knicks team, DiVincenzo's able to do, but he does it at a cheaper rate, and it allows them to use the asset that is Immanuel Quickley to acquire a player that they didn't have in OG Anunoby, who provides size, secondary rim protection, point of attack defense, all that stuff, right? So I think that's like another thing that people are just really not talking enough about is DiVincenzo makes the Anunoby trade possible for the Knicks and makes them as good as they have been when they're fully healthy, which is, what we talked about last time, basically like outer circle championship contender.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more thing about him defensively, and I know I was saying, he's a fine defender. I'm not going to say he's a great defender, but one thing worth pointing out is if you've looked at any like advanced statistics this year, specifically like the defensive metrics, they love Isaiah Hartenstein. Like, I'm not saying for some reason. There's a reason why, and I think he has been a good defender this year. But he's like number one in defensive EPM. It's insane. Part of that to me is Dante DiVincenzo enables that a little bit because they're very heavy drop coverage. They ice a lot of ball screens on like side pick and rolls and stuff, and they'll just put Isaiah Hartenstein and drop. And one of the reasons that works is because Dante DiVincenzo is such a strong defender, fighting over those screens, because that's what you need if you're going to be dropping on like high pick and rolls and stuff. You have to have somebody who's going to chase over those screens and run guys off the 3-point line and funnel them down into that drop coverage. And then that allows OG Anunoby to, be able to dig at the nail, and rotate and, provide low man help if he needs to. I think Dante DiVincenzo, even though I'm not going to call him a leader or anything like that, I think his competence in that area of the defensive end enables the overall defensive success of New York.
Mm-hmm. Those two, DiVincenzo and Anunoby, are a perfect defensive fit at the 2 and 3. We never talk. That's another thing. We need to talk more about defensive fits with certain players, how portable your defensive style is, all that stuff. But anyways, moving on to another large market team. I mentioned the Julius Randle shouldn't be an all-star type thing. We had our all-star podcast episode, my all-stars and stuff. And one of those guys, so first of all, Alex, you and I don't prescribe by this, but when most people talk about all-star teams, right? Usually the team that's by far, in a way, the best team in basketball has multiple all-stars, right? Usually the second best player on the team with the best record in the NBA is an all-star, historically. Am I right?
Yeah.
Then why is it that Kristaps Porzingis, the second best player on the Boston Celtics, was not an all-star this year?
I think that's probably, everyone talked about Trae Young. I get it. But in terms of snubs, I can't wrap my head around why Porzingis was snubbed. It's insane.
So back to the trade-off thing, right? Last year, I think I was listening to Zach Lowe podcast, and he put it for me in a way that I really hadn't seen it. But basically, like the Celtics, it was a great problem to have, right? With the Horford Robert Williams thing. But it's like it was a dance between, when Horford's our center, we have this like beautiful 5-out offense, like, so much passing and driving and kicking and shooting and all this stuff. Like, it's incredible. We have the best offense in basketball. But even though Al Horford is a good rim protector, he's not an elite one, and our defense suffered a little bit, right? It's not that elite top 3 defense. It's more like a top 7, top 9, whatever defense. With Rob Williams, you have, when he's healthy, one of the best rim protector shot blockers in basketball. You have that elite defense, but there goes your spacing. Even though he provides vertical spacing, it's not as effective as the
especially for a team
spacing.
as 3-point heavy as the Celtics.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't really have like incredible lob throwers. Pretty good lob throwers, but not incredible lob throwers to take advantage of that. Kristaps Porzingis, you don't have to make the trade-off. I mean, it's true that healthy Robert Williams is a better defensive anchor than Kristaps Porzingis, but Kristaps Porzingis is still like 93% of a healthy Robert Williams, right, with his rim protecting. And then on offense, Kristaps is not only a better spacer than Al Horford, but he's just a better offensive player. Like, okay, so let's talk. First of all, we've talked a little bit about this on the podcast, but being a good three-point shooter and being a good spacer are two different things, okay? Like, people are always like, I don't know, I'll see it, especially like, I remember when Isaiah Stewart was like first coming into the league, and they're like, man, if this guy could just, actually, let's do Ben Simmons, right? Like, man, if this guy Ben Simmons could just shoot 35% on three-point shots, like, he's perfect. He's elite, top 10 player. They're doing the same thing with Evan Mobley. It's not enough to just be a 35% three-point shooter. You need to be able to shoot above average, whatever. The average at the time was 35%. Now I think it's like 36, 37%. You need to be able to shoot at that level or above that on high volume. Okay, because it really doesn't matter if you're only hitting 1-3 per game. They're like, fine, that's cool, whatever. We're still not going to change the way we defend. They read the
scouting report. They're gonna help off you every time.
Exactly. So, and then Horford could do that, right? He can shoot a lot of threes. He shoots above average. But the other thing is, nowadays, with how athletic guys are, how much ground they can cover, teams are like, fine, you're a good three-point shooter. We're still going to sag off you because you have a slow release, so we'll just close out to you as fast as we can. We're going to trust our closeout. Kristaps Porzingis shoots the ball like it's a slingshot. Like, he has such a ridiculously fast release. So he's got the holy trinity of spacing. He can shoot well, accurately, he can shoot with volume, and he shoots the ball quickly, okay? So you've got all three of those things. So he's a good spacer, all right? But that's not all that he has in his bag. He is arguably like one of the best post players in basketball. He's in the 98th percentile in post-up efficiency while also being in the 94th percentile in post-up volume. Now, he doesn't have a bag, a post bag. He's not Hakeem Olajuwon. He just real quick, I'm taller than you. Give me the ball. Let me shoot over you. But it works. It's not something that, who's that one idiot on Twitter who's always like, he's always like, you know what I'm talking about? He's standing in front of a camera.
Yeah.
And he's like, he'll say something like, I'm trying to think, Rashad McCants had a bag, man. He could put the ball between his legs, but he was blue-balled out of the NBA. He was blackballed out of the NBA because the NBA hates bags and it's all nerds. And it's just like, like his agent like reached out to him to make this. It's some bullshit happened, This guy he wasn't watching some Rashad McCants film, and it's just like, man, this guy was something in the NBA. They just took it away from him. Those damn nerds, right? So yeah, Porzingis doesn't have the bag, but he's still a great post player. He's a really good cutter. He's great at attacking closeouts. He's like a really good like second side driver. I think he's in the. I think I had pulled up like 70th percentile.
I think that's one of his most underrated offensive contributions.
Yeah, seriously,
he's
75th percentile drives. 75th percentile drives efficiency. He's 7'2". Like okay, obviously, he's an insane basketball player. He's got GOAT potential. But you know how many times I see a Victor Wembanyama closeout attack on my timeline, and they're like, dude, this is insane. Kristaps Porzingis can do that. Kristaps Porzingis can do that. He can do those crazy things. He is a unicorn. And for some reason,
and we're not saying Wemby is Porzingis, because that was a comp that happened way too much, and it was stupid. We're just saying that like when Porzingis, there are other 7+ footers that do that, like attacking a closeout. Watch any Celtics game. Porzingis does that a lot. Post the highlights.
He can. So he has that, right? He has that in his bag. He can also catch lobs like Robert Williams. He doesn't get up as high, but he doesn't need to. He's 7'3". He's got insane catch radius, right? Like, dude, this guy He's a top 23, 24 player in basketball. And he wasn't on the Eastern Conference All-Star team, the weaker team. That, to me, is underrated.
I still can't wrap my head around that. I mean, and then we didn't even talk about I did a whole video on it, and that's why I'm bringing it up. I did it when the trade first happened, but like the amount of offensive initiation that he does for them is insane. And for a team like the Celtics, like the Celtics do so much off the ball. And part of that, like if you're going to run a lot of like delay 5-out stuff, you need like a post initiator that can pass. Watch any Kings game, watch any Nuggets game. Sabonis and Jokic, the reason all that works is because they're so good at passing and, of course, have the spacing necessary. Sabonis, he's been a very good 3-point shooter this year. Low volume, but the reason he can get away with like that delay stuff just inside the arc is because he's got that mid-range game. Jokic has that mid-range game. Porzingis, he's got to be honored that far out, and that opens up all of his passing, which you have to be able to make the passes, which is the next step. And he's capable of making those passes and reading the floor and seeing how the defense is reacting to whatever the Celtics are doing. It's just like, for a team like the Celtics, it's no wonder that their record is so much better when he's playing. I mean, they were pretty much unstoppable when he was healthy early on in the season. And since he's been healthy, they've been back to being absolutely insane. They had, even saying that they had a rough patch for the Celtics, they were still, demolishing teams. They're what's their record right now? Like 48 and it's insane.
I could do a stat
on
check.
paper. They're one of the best teams in a long time. Just so far
He's
through
their
the regular
second best
season.
player.
Yeah. And I think their starting lineup, their starting lineup is plus 15.4. It's ridiculous. I mean,
46 and 12.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, wasn't he an all-star last year? Or no? No, he wasn't.
No.
And you could argue he should have been an all-star last year. Moving on to a far, unless you have anything else to add on Porzingis.
No.
Moving on to a far less interesting player. Probably in most people's eyes. Maybe not in my eyes or the eyes of Thunder fans. Let's talk about a guy who I alluded to at the beginning of the podcast. He's only playing 15 minutes a night. His name is Aaron Wiggins. And some of you listening, I think mostly like real basketball sickos listen to this, but maybe there's a couple people who find it on YouTube. You might not even know who Aaron Wiggins is, because some games, for some reason, Aaron Wiggins doesn't even play. Sometimes Aaron Wiggins will literally get no minutes. I don't understand why. Take that up with Mark Daignault. Different discussion about that. Even worse than him playing 15 minutes a game and occasionally getting DNPs. He hardly plays with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and I would argue that there is a ton of evidence that he should get significantly more run with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. In the span of 634 possessions where he's been on the floor with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the Thunder are plus 10.2 in those possessions when Aaron Wiggins and SGA are sharing the floor. Not only does Aaron Wiggins score about 14 points per 75 on 62.5% true shooting when he's on the floor with Shai, but Shai scores 37 points per 75 possessions on 61% true shooting when he's on the floor with Aaron Wiggins. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's already averaging like roughly 30 points per game, around that. But he scores even more on average when he's on the floor with Aaron Wiggins. And it's because Aaron Wiggins is just the perfect player to put next to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. for so many reasons. But he had a stat that's actually like kind of mind blowing to me. So he's shooting above 50% from three this season. Of all qualifying players that have played, I think the criteria I set was like, you have to have played like at least like 500 minutes this season. He's attempting about 4 threes per 36 minutes. Not super high volume. But of the players that qualified, he currently has the highest 3-point percentage in the NBA. Aaron Wiggins occasionally gets DNPs, 15 minutes a night, and he misses his threes less than 50% of the time. Of all players 6'9" or under, Aaron Wiggins is 6'6". Of all players 6'9" or under, he has the highest true shooting percentage in the entire NBA. He's shooting like 57% from the field, something like that. In the medium, high, and very high leverage minutes where Shea and Aaron Wiggins are on the floor together, OKC is a plus 8.7. So that factors out like, garbage time, early on in games where they're just blowing teams out. They're plus 8.7 in medium, high, and very high leverage minutes together. Any way you slice it, I just don't see any argument that he shouldn't be getting more minutes, shouldn't be getting more reps with the starters. According to EPM, which is, I've mentioned before, one of the few advanced stats that I like, there's probably not a better 15-minute per game, low usage guy in the NBA. I think he's probably about as perfect of a 15-minute per game guy as you can ask for, which I'm kind of the opinion he's shown enough that he kind of demands having more minutes. Another thing I want to talk about is his cutting, because when you look at how OKC plays, very much like we're going to have Shea like created an advantage, draw that help forward from the paint, because you have to step out and make sure that he doesn't get whatever he wants in the mid-range. And that leaves all that space on the baseline. And Aaron Wiggins is like the perfect cutter. He's like, in terms of cutting, he's basically what J-Dub does off ball as a cutter. Just, maybe not as lengthy and maybe not as athletic. But as far as like actually finishing off of the cuts and recognizing when those cuts are available, he is up there with some of the best in the NBA. And then defensively, which, the Thunder are a good defensive team on paper. There are areas where they are definitely lacking defensively, specifically in the Josh Giddey department. I haven't watched last night's game. Apparently he was pretty good defensively last night, but overall this season, Josh Giddey has not been great defensively. And that's where a guy like Aaron Wiggins really sticks out to me. He's 6'6", but I think he plays a lot bigger than he actually is. And I think that's partially due to how OKC operates defensively. Aaron Wiggins is often in situations where he has to be the low man, sinking in to provide help. And he does a great job at it and shutting down guys who are much bigger than him, just because, he's a little bit lengthier. He can get up off his feet and contest shots at the rim, and stop drivers before they get there. If you watch him move laterally against like guys on the perimeter, whenever he's in just pure one-on-one situations, his defensive footwork is like beautiful. Like his lateral movement just is so clean. He doesn't get caught up on his own feet. No wasted movement. It's just all very, very, very sound. I'm a little curious how he'd be against some more difficult matchups, because obviously Dort is the point of attack defender 99% of the time when they're on the floor together. But I think Aaron Wiggins is probably capable of handling more on his defensive plate. But his overall uniqueness, in terms of his defensive role, kind of has him being more of a Swiss Army knife, but I think he does a great job at it. And I don't know why he doesn't play more. I just don't understand.
This might speak as a testament to kind of how underrated Aaron Wiggins is. But last week, right, we were talking about the inner circle title contenders, and I was kind of saying OKC's right on the outskirts of that. And we were talking about like the perfect 5-man closing lineup, right? We're talking about that fifth guy. We talked about Josh Giddey. We talked about Isaiah Joe potentially being that guy. We talked about Gordon Hayward. I didn't even mention Aaron Wiggins. And I'm hip to the Aaron Wiggins hype. I'm hip to the idea of the guy. But it's just like, that's like, even a guy like me who watches a lot of OKC Thunder kind of like, forgets about him when you're having these like really serious conversations where it's like, this guy kind of like waiting in the wings might be the keystone to OKC shocking the world and winning an NBA title this season. The one question I have for you, I'm starting also to become more kind of aware of some of Dagnall's. He was kind of like a new toy for me as his coaching. Like I was just like, man, like this guy's awesome. Like, he's got these guys playing so hard. He's willing to try new things. He empowers his defenders, all this ghost screening. Like this is that dude, right? But I'm starting to see a little bit of his warts as a coach. And I think one of them is maybe a little bit of a hesitancy to switch up his lineups. Is that really what's you think going on here with the Wiggins stuff?
I think hesitancy to switch up his lineups in the sense that like I would argue he's too willing to try new things. Like there are guys who got a lot of minutes this year that should not have gotten a lot of minutes this year. Because I get OKC is like, oh, this is their first year being, back in the playoffs. Like, it's, they're still growing and young and learning. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but you've seen how good they are. So I think it's time to probably take yourself a little bit more seriously. And I think something that Mark Daigneault does is he's still experimenting a little bit too much. And maybe that tightens up a lot in the playoffs. But I think for a guy like Aaron Wiggins, it's not going to be ideal that he hasn't gotten more run. Because right now, OKC has 7 guys who have played 1,000 minutes this season. And then after that, the next highest is Aaron Wiggins with 750, Kenrich Williams with 681, Jalen Williams, the second one, with 575. It's a laundry list of guys who have just sporadically gotten minutes throughout the season. There's no clear rotation has been kind of set. And it's not like Aaron Wiggins has been a consistent part of the rotation just from like a minutes per game perspective. But I think he is underutilized and ends up kind of losing out on opportunities in favor of other guys who probably shouldn't be getting as much opportunity. And I don't really know why Daigneault does that. I don't know. Maybe it's the philosophy of like, oh, they've invested so much time in like Ousmane Dieng, or Lindy Waters is going to get minutes for some reason. Vasilije Micic was kind of filling a unique role for the team when he was on the team. But yeah, I don't know. I think just any way you slice it, there's just not guys who are able to do what he does and provide the value that he does for the team. And maybe Daigneault tightens it up a lot in the playoffs, but I don't understand. I couldn't even begin to speculate why he does what he does. Okay, the only theory that's been thrown out is development.
I'll say this. We still have a small sample size on the jumper. I think it's 86 threes this year. He's shooting 51.6% on. I'm pretty sure he's not a 50% 3-point shooter.
Oh, I don't think so either. But if that levels out, that's like probably 39% on way higher.
If he's a 39%
volume.
3-point shooter, and this is like gets back to the underrated thing. This guy's like a 15-minute player per game. Most people who watch basketball couldn't pick him out of a lineup, right? if he's legitimately that good of a 3-point shooter and something were to happen where he fell into the lap of another team, like I wouldn't be surprised if he was like a 32-minute per game player. You know what I mean? That's just like how underrated he is.
Yeah, he's so portable too. Like pretty much you throw Aaron Wiggins on any team in the NBA right now, he's a solid contributor, regardless of how many minutes he plays.
All right, so I'm gonna pull at one of your heartstrings here, please. Please don't be mad at me, Alex. But we're talking right now about these. We're talking a lot about, Aaron Wiggins. He falls under this class of like wing, forward, defensively slanted. I'm watching the Timberwolves Memphis game from earlier this week, and I'm just watching Jaden McDaniels, right? And then I'm like watching him. I hear he's in a slump, so I go on Basketball Reference real quick during one of the dead balls. I'm like, okay, 36% from three. I'm like, that's a little bit concerning. Like, what happens in the playoff? He's got a slower 3-point shot. He's not. The thing that worries me about Jaden McDaniels is he's not a brute like Aaron Gordon, where like if the shot's not going, he can just play in the dunker spot and get physical with you and all that. Like if he can't hit his threes, it's going to be tricky in the playoffs for him, right? I'm sitting there thinking about that, and I'm like, man, there's just like so many, and we've had a whole podcast. The X Factor Pod is basically a podcast about us talking about these guys, these wings and forwards who are like really gifted defensively, really athletic. And we're like, man, if they could just hit enough 3-pointers, like they could be like this perfect fifth piece to a team that can make a deep playoff run, right? We always talk about it. So, you can name Marjon Beauchamp and Dante Exum and, Denny Avdia. The list goes on, right? And then it hit me. I'm like, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is that dude. Like, he's like what we're hoping all these guys are. You know what I mean? Like, there's like 30 players in the NBA we're praying to God become Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Like, we talk so much about Herb Jones and Jaden McDaniels and Alex Caruso, how great of defenders they are. KCP's not as good as them. He's probably like 99, like we said with KP, with the other KP, Kristaps Porzingis, he's probably like 93% of the defender those guys are. So he's like 93% of the defender those guys are, right? Incredible point of attack, screen navigator, chaser, all that stuff, right? But he can actually shoot. Like he's got a long history of being a really good shooter. Wide open 3-pointers. I think he's in the 89th percentile over the last 3 years. Overall, he's like in the 70th percentile on just threes in general, wide open, contested, whatever. And then you've talked about this so many times, but he has a counter to the hard closeout. He can go like 1 dribble, 2 dribble, mid-range pull up. He's in the 77th percentile on mid-rangers. And then, he also has like that Rip Hamilton element to him where like they kind of give him these spot up middies just because he's such a good mid-range shooter where it's like still an efficient shot, even though like, most of the league shouldn't take that shot anymore. So he's just like this dude is like, we're always like us nerds are always talking about these like wings and forwards who just really good defenders that can't shoot. And we're like, man, like what a difference it would be for their team if they could. That's Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and he's won a championship. He's been part of 2 of the last 4 championship teams, and there's a good chance, he'll be a part of a couple more championship teams if he keeps hanging around Nikola Jokic. And I just think like that gets overlooked, like how valuable. Like this guy's I don't have like my exact list in front of me, but he's definitely a top 60 player in basketball right now.
Yeah, I mean it's hard. I'd be hard pressed to name that many guys better than him. He's just like you get to a point where those are the guys, like we've said a billion times, those are the guys who kind of move the needle. And I mean, shoot, last year in the postseason, from the corner in the playoffs last year, 47%, 38% overall from 3 on long mid-range shots in the playoffs last year. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope shot 67% on long mid-range shots. Now, granted, volume's pretty small. It's 24 attempts, but it's the playoffs, and you're working with sample sizes that small in the postseason. And then he can finish. He's 62% at the rim. This year his finishing numbers are a little bit down, but in the playoffs last year, 62% at the rim.
One other thing I want to mention, this is more to the defensive side, just as kind of a friendly reminder. The Nuggets have a top 10 defense in the NBA despite starting Jamal Murray, MPJ, and Nikola Jokic. And I mean, all of them are better defenders than I think most people give them credit for, but like, you don't have like a true defensive anchor on that team. That tells you a lot of what you need to know about how good KCP is on the perimeter as a defender.
Yeah, he's somebody that I like. If you're a guy who like doesn't have necessarily like star usage upside, or you don't project to be like a first, second, or third option, and you're a wing who's like, you're going to be a shooter and just play finisher, watch KCP tape and do what he does.
Is he the best role player in basketball?
I mean, generally speaking, over the last like
Non-big
X
man.
amount of time. Yeah, big man's a little, because like then you start getting into like the Draymond Green discussion,
Chet Holmgren,
et cetera. Yeah, Chet, guys like that. Jalen Williams. But yeah, I would say like probably in terms of that archetype of player, that like role player 3-and-D, which I think is a reductive label, but I think probably he has as good a case as anybody. But moving on to a role-playing big man, let's talk a little bit about Ivica Zubac, because I've tweeted about this a good amount this season, because for some reason he continuously just doesn't get a ton of recognition, which, it's understandable. He plays with Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and James Harden. I get it. And he's not flashy. He's like probably one of the least interesting players to watch in the entire NBA. That being said, in terms of centers that are not one of the following: all-star caliber, or defensive player of the year caliber, or all defensive level, that type of center. Out of all centers that are not one of those two things, I think Zubac is probably as good of a center as you could possibly ask for. I can't really think of anyone better, which is perfect for a team like the Clippers, because they have two wings and a point guard as their kind of focal points, as their stars. His counting stats are very, very good. They're the best of his career so far. He's not even averaging a double-double. So like, some people might look at that, they'll be a little underwhelmed, unimpressed. Is what it is. His block numbers don't necessarily paint him as a high-level rim protector. He's only averaging like 1.3 blocks per game. But I think his stats are very, 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 very deceptive, which, that's something we talk about a lot, is how deceptive stats can be. I think he is very low risk and like reliable reward. I'm not even going to say he's high reward. He's just low risk, and like, exactly what you're getting, and he's going to benefit your team and raise your overall floor. I think he's one of the most efficient defenders in the NBA, if that makes sense. Some numbers that I find really, really interesting. And keep in mind, he's a drop big. He's sinking back to the nail, and kind of just backpedaling into the paint, defending pick and rolls vast majority of the time. Teams not only shoot 5.8% worse at the rim when he's on the floor versus when he's off, they're attempting shots at the rim 7 percentage points less frequently when he's on the floor. Among bigs with at least 500 minutes played this season, according to Cleaning the Glass, that 7% rim frequency differential is number one in the NBA. So that speaks a little bit to his impact of just rim deterrence, which the eye test definitely backs that up. He's not as long as a Rudy Gobert. He's not as, quick as a Jaren Jackson Jr., but in terms of just keeping guys from wanting to go down there in the first place, he's about as good as the other guys. the actual rim protection, I think, is where you can start seeing the difference between him and like a Rudy Gobert and a Bam Adebayo and a Jaren Jackson Jr. and other big Brooke Lopez, guys like that. Their defense is 6.9 points per 100 possessions better with him on the floor versus off. We've talked a ton about how perfectly he fits with James Harden, just being the guy who can demand coverage and a tag on the roll, provide that vertical spacing with James Harden when they're doing spread pick and roll stuff. He makes that work, and he does it very, very well. He doesn't take bad shots, really. My cats are going crazy right now.
It's been a bad pet episode for us.
Yeah, seriously. He's in the 99th percentile in short mid-range efficiency per cleaning the glass, which definitely passes the eye test to me because he's got that like push shot floater that is money. He doesn't really have a bag in the post. He's very, very simple. He's got like the Robin Lopez bag where it's just like, one or two pivots and then just putting up the little baby hook, baby push shot. And it's just automatic. It's going in. Specific role centers like this, where your role is so clearly defined and so diluted to where you can just be like exceptional at these very, very specific things. That is where so much value lies. And that's where a lot of teams seem to get things wrong. They will look for the guy who can do a lot of things okay, whereas they should be looking for the guy who can do 2, 3, 4 things very, 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 very well. And that fits your team. And Ivica Zubac does the things that he does. Those are the only things he does, and he does them exceptionally well, and it fits exactly what the Clippers are doing. And that really should be like the philosophy with these underrated players is like, yeah, there's guys who probably have star upside that, if they got more opportunity, they would be stars. But like really the underrated players are the ones who like, yeah, if you put them in this very specific role and you give them these very specific responsibilities and put them in very specific situations where that they're going to thrive, those are the guys that have so much value to your team and that definitely, move the needle in a championship setting. Does that mean a guy like Zubac is always going to be effective? No. Matchups exist. Good matchups exist. Bad matchups exist. Can he get played off the floor? Yeah. But in the situations where you can live with him on the floor, he does very, 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 very well.
Yeah. Two things I want to talk about because I think this is a great teaching point for our audience here. One, you mentioned the playing off the floor. I think we've cited this before. I did a study on Basketball Insiders about a month ago now that basically the weight of good centers now is going up. And that means that there's less kind of like small ball matchups to play Zubac off the floor, which makes him even that more effective. And then another thing that we talked about recently when S was on the pod with the Detroit Pistons, where it's like when you're a bad team, you want like those generalists, right? You want guys who can just kind of do a lot of things okay. But when you're a great team, like this Clippers team, you have great infrastructure. You want these ancillary guys to be specialists. And Zubac is a specialist. He fills a very specific role, does it very well for this Clippers team. And he's very like underappreciated. I was going to ask you, just off the top of your head, who would you rather have? Because I think the other big man who's kind of in this tier of player that's also underrated, we also mentioned him in the podcast, Isaiah Hartenstein. Between the two of them, who would you rather have? And it's funny, they were actually each other's, they were like tag team bros 2 years ago on the Clippers. But
yeah, that's right. That's actually a really good question. I think Hartenstein is probably a better offensive piece. And then like we kind of talked about it earlier, how the defensive metrics paint Isaiah Hartenstein as this like DPOY, but he's not. I don't think even Knicks fans are arguing that he should be. I think defensively, they're probably on a similar-ish tier. But offensively, I would probably go Hartenstein. Hartenstein's like walking a fine line between like, oh, he's like really, really good and like the role player kind of tier. Like I think Hartenstein is like on the press. I'm not saying he's going to be like a star, but like upper end center, I think is like an attainable thing for him, where it's like you start trying to name, you know, how many centers are better than this guy, and then the list ends up being way shorter than you thought it was going to be.
I'm just thinking about, oh, man, should I just get like outrageous like this late in the pod? Do you think I should say something crazy on a pod that has nothing about something that's, so I love me some Kings, but I'm just sitting here in my head, like Hartenstein's obviously a much better defender than Sabonis. I'm like, how much of a gap is between them offensively? I mean, it's still Sabonis is like the better big, like offensively, but is it really that great, like that far apart where it's like we can't start talking about like Hartenstein?
Massive.
You still think
it's pretty massive. I think offense, like scoring wise, the
scoring, that's where I'm talking, but the passing can't be that. It's not that much. Like I think Sabonis is in a different tier. Like he's a better passer for sure. But I feel like, I mean, Hart's still a good passer. He's just as good of a screener. They're both insane screeners. Screeners. And then Sabonis just has like the beautiful, like, you know, low post game. I love Sabonis. I love that he's got one of the ideal male bodies. Okay, I'm talking about a guy with one of the best bodies in basketball. But I'm just like, if Hartenstein gets a little bit better, like I still think Sabonis is a better player. Don't get me wrong, but like the fact that he's that close, like man, Hartenstein's really good.
I think it's a little undersold how good of a ball handler Sabonis is. And like, you know, we're talking about the passing, and I think that kind of speaks to like the advantage creation, where I would see probably the biggest difference between them. It's like that difference is still pretty wide for me. I think Hartenstein can do a good amount, and he can, you know, put the ball on the floor, like posting up, and you live with it and it's fine. He can, you know, get to his spots and create for other guys. But Sabonis, like, occasionally will be able to, like, you know, cross a couple times and drive to the rim, like face up. He has like somewhat of a face up game at times. It's like, whoa, we have like a couple of Kings fans who get very mad at us every time we post. No,
I mean, those fans.
You just fueled the fire.
Those fans should know that I am an ally. I'm one of the pioneers of the Keegan Murray movement. Okay, I know you were there with me at the forefront of it all, but I stand that guy. Okay, and I love Sabonis. I'm not saying Sabonis is a better player. I'm not saying that. He is a better player, but you had to think for a second when I asked, didn't you? You for a second.
I mean, it was. Yeah, it's like, okay, I thought about it in the sense that I processed your question, and then within.
And then you thought about asking
milliseconds. I was like, oh yeah, Matt, you're smoking crack. Oh man. Okay. At least one player.
Yeah, that's all to say. Hartenstein is really good, even though the segment was not about him. I made it about him. Because you know our big market agenda.
Right. Yeah, we're only here to push big market teams.
I'm not saying, for the record, let's drop it right now, because if you try to push this as me saying Hartenstein and Sabonis are the same player, I saw you say, there's a clip in there where you say Aaron Wiggins is the perfect player, and then you pause for a second before you said what you're going to say next. You were going to say to play with Shea. I'm going to clip that. Aaron Wiggins is the perfect player, and I'm going to tweet that out.
I'd be right. Everyone would agree with me.
4 times a day.
I mean, understandable. Hey, it's good PR.
But so yeah, last player. Beginning of the podcast, I talked about like kind of when you're able to identify these guys, it gives you like an advantage analysis wise, right? You're able to pick out things and then they come true in the future. And then people are like, man, this guy knows a thing or two. And I know your memory is not as great as my like crazy, creepy memory, but you remember, like, at the beginning of the year, I was on the Cavs. I was on the Cavs beat. I was on their trail. I was like, this team's got something, right? They have, like, if they can find the perfect blend, there's something. Okay, and they did find the perfect blend, and now they kind of lost it that Garland and Mobley are back. But like they have a blend. They have a gear they can hit now, and I think the reason for that is Max Strus. Strus is like the opposite end of the KCP spectrum. He's like he kind of falls in that Luke Kennard, Grayson Allen. I'm trying to think of other like sharpshooters. Am I missing some big ones? Isaiah Joe.
Yeah. If you hadn't asked me, I would have been able to rattle off like 5 guys, but I blanked.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm talking. We know the guy, right? That type of Duncan Robinson. He falls in that sharpshooter category. It's like this guy's like a really good spacer. If only he could hold his own on defense. And so here's the funny thing about Strus. First of all, this guy is a sharpshooter, quote unquote, who's shooting only 34% from 3. Yet his team is a +7 per 100 when he's on the floor. And he's in the 90th percentile in the entire NBA in minutes played. So this is not an Aaron Wiggins small sample size thing. As much as we love Aaron Wiggins, right? This guy is proven the perfect player, Aaron Wiggins. But this guy is like proven to be a positive impact on this Cleveland Cavaliers team. Also, they have bad shooting luck when he's on the floor. So that means his value is getting watered down a little bit by opponent shooting luck. So it could be even high. It could be like a +9 per 100. How about I tell you this? The Cleveland Cavaliers have the 4th best lineup in the NBA that has played at least 300 non-garbage time minutes together. That lineup does not feature Darius Garland, does not feature Evan Mobley, but it does feature Max Strus. I'm not saying he's better than those players, but so Max Strus is having this positive an impact while only shooting 34% from 3, and that being the reason that he's employed in theory, right?
Right.
So we talked about the holy trinity of spacing, okay? And I think the more I'm digging into it, the more I'm learning about basketball, I'm realizing that in that holy trinity, the dirty secret about spacing, the least important of those 3 things is efficiency. Like how well you actually shoot from 3. What matters more when it comes to spacing is volume and speed of release. And Max Strus has those down pat, okay? I think Chris Fedor on the Zach Lowe podcast actually cited a study that Cleveland did internally this offseason that shooting volume matters much more for spacing than shooting efficiency, right? So you have that. Another thing, Strus, while only shooting 34% from 3, a lot of that is the degree of difficulty of his shots because he's still shooting over the last 3 years 46% on wide open threes, which is like 92nd percentile league wide. Insane. So he's still like hitting the wide. It's not like he's forgotten how to shoot. Okay. It's just he takes really tough threes. Ben Taylor, a guy me and you both respect greatly, has a passer rating metric that it's probably the best publicly available estimate of a player's passing. Better than assists, better than assist percentage, better than assist to turnovers, better than assist usage, whatever. Even better than potential assists. And in that stat, he is in the passer rating stat, he is, I just had this pulled up, bad podcasting. He is in the 70th percentile as a passer, okay? He and Jared Allen have this like 2-man game where they give Strus like these. We've talked about it. You put Strus in these quick hitting kind of off of movement actions. He'll come off a curl and then Allen will be there to set the screen. He'll catch the pass. 2 defenders will come to Strus because he's such a good shooter. Even though he's only shooting 34% from 3, teams treat him like he's shooting 45% from 3. And then he'll hit Allen for the little dump off pass. And you know what's more efficient than a 45% 3-point shooter? A 90% layup. That's super efficient, right? He creates those.
I got a stat for you. And this is I pulled this up because I knew you were going to bring it up. So, Jared Allen and Max Strus have shared the floor 2,628 possessions this season. Jared Allen, when he's on the floor with Max Strus, 80.2% on 2s. Excuse me. He's assisted on 80.2% of his 2s. He's scoring 20 points per 75 possessions when he's on the floor with Max Strus. Like, Jarrett Allen becomes a 20 point per game center when he's on the floor with Max Strus because that 2-man game is just nasty. And Max Strus shoots 57.2% from two when he's on the floor with Jarrett Allen, because Jarrett Allen, when they're running this little two-man game and they're, DHOs and Jarrett Allen's rolling to the basket and Strus is driving off the screen, they're basically in 2-on-1 situations. And you got to pick your poison between 20 point per game score when he's on the floor with Max Strus, Jarrett Allen, or Max Strus driving to the basket. So, 57% from two for basically a shooting guard is really, really good. So the fact that he's only shooting 34% from three when he's on the floor with Jarrett Allen, it's like, well, okay, you can live with that because he's shooting 57% on twos. Like, that's fine. You live with that every time. So yeah, anyways, I just think I'm with you. His offensive value in the context that they're using him in defies the logic of like, oh, you have to be an efficient 3-point shooter. It's like, no, he demands a closeout because his release is lightning fast and he shoots a lot of them.
Yeah. I'm going to be very careful with my words here because I am not at all implying, because I feel like I've already said too many outrageous things for one podcast. I'm not at all implying that Max Strus is a better defender than Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I think Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is pretty easily the better defender between the two, right? Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, 91st percentile in defensive EPM. Do you know what Max Strus is in defensive? The sharpshooter, the professional sharpshooter Max Strus is in defensive EPM.
What is he?
He's in the 95th percentile. And that's with his team being in the 21st percentile in opponent 3-point shooting when he's on the floor. Again, we've talked about how these one-number metrics look favorably on players who play on teams with really good defensive infrastructure. The Cleveland Cavaliers are the second best defense in basketball. So that's helping him out. And under normal circumstances, he wouldn't have a better defensive APM than Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, but he's still like a really, really good perimeter defender. And he also, you have to think about this. These metrics tell you how good a player is in their specific role. Strus's role when he's playing with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell in the starting lineup is to guard the other team's best perimeter player. So he is being overtasked on defense, has bad shooting luck when he's on the floor, and yet he still has like an elite defensive EPM. And this is a guy, this is why he's underrated, because the whole point of his existence right in the NBA is, he can shoot. He's a great shooter. And yet he's shooting 34% from three, and his team is performing like a high-level contending team when he's on the floor because of the passing, because of the quick-hitting playmaking he has with Jarrett Allen, because of the shooting gravity, even though he's not hitting his shots, that he creates with his volume and his spacing. With the speed of his shooting release, because of his defense. Like, that is the underrated player if I have ever seen one. Yeah. Now you have any more words on Strus?
No, beautifully said.
Thank you. Maybe I'll turn that into a enhanced pod. We'll see.
That'd be a good one.
Some Strus. But so like we said, this is not a top 6 most underrated players in the NBA. We're not ranking them. I don't even know how you would. That'd be so hard to rank like level of underratedness.
Yeah.
Like empirically, you'd have to do a poll of like 100 people to see where they think they are in the NBA, and then make the argument for where they would be, like where they should be in the NBA, and then whoever is like the most spots difference. Yeah, that's probably. But we're not doing that.
That'd be an impossible study, or nearly. I mean, it wouldn't be impossible. I mean, you could do it.
It wouldn't be impossible. We could have Dan run it.
Yeah,
he would do it for us if we asked. If I admitted that Tyrese Maxey's a top 25 player, he'd do it for me. But
that's not a bad idea.
I was gonna say really quickly, we just want to just to name some other guys that easily could have had a segment that we just didn't do a segment on that are underrated. Do you have a couple that you want to say?
You kick it off, because I have.
All right.
I have some guys. I got some guys.
Okay. I mean, I'm not gonna wax to it. One guy I was thinking about. I'm saying more like he's probably like a top 8 rotation player on a playoff team, and I think people just don't think about him that often. Chris Duarte, where he's got like that bucket getter bag where he can, you can't really, like, he's a good shooter, and then since he has a bag, you can't just run him off the 3-point line. Like, he's got nice footwork, he can get into the mid range, get to the rim, and then he's like an improved defender. Like, he's got solid size for like the 2 guard, plays hard. He's one of those guys now where he's like, he really just wants to be on the court consistently. So when he's on the court, he's playing pretty good defense. I kind of like him. I think he's a fun player. I think he's the best out of between like Davion Mitchell, Keon Ellis, and him. I think he's their best player between those 3, and I think he should kind of be getting a lion's share of the minutes in that role. Some other guys I listed, Andrew Nembhard, can never talk enough about him. I think he's a phenomenal player. I think he's got a really bright future. Aaron Nesmith he's gotten so much better this year. I kind of wish I put him higher in our redraft. He's awesome. Isaiah Joe, we've talked about him. I think he didn't warrant a segment just because we've had so many words to say about him. D'Anthony Melton,
a lot of people are pretty privy to Isaiah Joe at this point.
Yeah, they're starting to catch on to it. D'Anthony Melton, I think people forget how good he was last postseason and how like he was he had argument as the 3rd best player during that Boston Philly series for Philadelphia. Ayo Dosunmu.
Oh yeah, he's been sneaky good this year. Real quick, I got a couple guys from the Cavs.
Go ahead.
Sam Merrill and Dean Wade. Dean Wade is part of like one of the best lineups in basketball this year. He's been spectacular. He's in like 96th percentile in defensive EPM. Sam Merrill is literally like this dude should be getting like 50 handoffs a game because he's absolutely money. Just quick trigger, unguardable. It's insane. And he doesn't really get a whole lot of playing time, but oh well, I don't know. Come on, JB Bickerstaff, figure it out.
Did you have more you wanted to name? Oh.
Not really. You hit a lot of the guys that are like actually, underrated. There's guys that you can be like, a lot of these guys, you don't have to sacrifice too much when they're on the floor. There's underrated where you kind of get to the point of like, you got to give up a lot to justify them. And that's where you get into like super, super specialized guys or like generalists that aren't good enough to be generalists. But yeah, I think the guys you mentioned are pretty much the underrated guys that are not like star caliber players.
Yeah.
But I think unless you have anything else, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. If you guys enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, follow, whatever platform you're on. However you want to keep up with us, just be sure to subscribe, all that fun stuff. Did you have something?
Interrupt you? Yeah, 2 things.
Go for it.
3 things. 1, teaser. Next week's episode is going to be crazy.
Oh, boy.
We have a crazy thing. Right? Why are you looking at me like
I forgot what it is.
You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking. It's the debate.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, you're right.
It's going to be crazy. 2,
it's going to be a movie.
Remember, guys, questions. You could ask questions. Feel free to do that. And then the other thing I want to remind people, 19 subscribers away from 1,000. Yeah,
definitely be sure to subscribe. That's pretty wild that we're already almost there. It's not like I started it it was already at 900 when we started, but we don't have to talk about that. But yeah, really appreciate the support. The fact that, people are actually listening to this is really cool to both of us. So thank you. We're excited to keep doing it and excited to keep bringing you guys, really nerdy basketball stuff like this. Be sure to check us out on Twitter if you want to keep up with our other work, our solo acts, at Alex Hoops _ at Matt Issa 15, MATISSA 15. Leave a 5-star rating. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.